Iron Rails and Tender Souls by Weston Ford. The locomotive's whistle pierced the morning air as Clara Whitmore stepped onto the platform at Copper Ridge Station, her gloved hands trembling not from the October chill, but from the weight of the telegram crumpled in her reticule. Father gravely ill. Come at once. The words had shattered her comfortable existence in San Francisco, compelling her to return to the Nevada mining town she'd fled 3 years ago, swearing never to look back. The station master, grizzled and weathered like the mountains surrounding their valley, tipped his hat. "Miss Clara? That you? My word, you've grown into quite the lady." Clara forced a smile, though her stomach churned with anxiety. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson. I trust my father sent word about my arrival?" "He did indeed, though I'm afraid he's been too poorly to come himself. Doc Brennan says he's mending, but slowly." Henderson's weathered face creased with concern. "Young Walsh there offered to fetch you." Clara's breath caught as she turned to see a tall figure approaching through the dispersing steam. Marcus Walsh had changed considerably since she'd last seen him. The gangly boy she remembered had grown into a man of impressive stature, his shoulders broad beneath a well-tailored coat that spoke of newfound prosperity. His dark hair, once unruly, was now neatly trimmed, though rebellious strands still caught the morning light. But it was his eyes that stopped her completely, the same warm brown she remembered, now holding depths that spoke of experience and responsibility. "Clara." His voice had deepened, carrying a warmth that made her name sound like a caress. "Welcome home." She lifted her chin, drawing upon the poise she'd cultivated during her years in the city. "Mr. Walsh, how kind of you to serve as my escort." A ghost of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "The pleasure is entirely mine, Miss Whitmore." As Marcus helped her into his carriage, a far cry from the simple wagon his family had owned years ago, Clara couldn't help but notice the calluses on his hands, evidence that prosperity hadn't come without hard work. The interior of the carriage was well appointed but not ostentatious, speaking to practical success rather than mere show. "I was sorry to hear about your father's illness," Marcus said as they began the journey toward town. "Doc Brennan assures everyone that Augustus is responding well to treatment, though he's been worried sick about the mine operations." "You know about the mine?" Clara asked, surprised by his familiarity with her family's affairs. "I've been helping to oversee things while he's been recovering. Your father and we've developed a business relationship over the past year." Clara studied his profile as he guided the horses along the familiar road. The boy who'd once followed her around like a devoted puppy, whom she'd dismissed as beneath her notice, had clearly made something of himself. "What sort of business relationship?" "I've been investing in mining operations throughout the territory. Your father's silver mine has shown considerable promise, though it requires significant capital investment to reach its full potential." The implications of his words settled over her like a weight. "Are you saying my father is in debt to you?" Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "I'm saying your father is a proud man who's been struggling to maintain his independence while facing some difficult financial realities. We've worked together to find solutions that benefit us both." Clara lapsed into silence, processing this unexpected development. She'd assumed her father's mining operation was thriving based on his letters. The thought that he might be in financial straits, and beholden to Marcus Walsh, of all people, unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The town of Copper Ridge had grown during her absence, with new businesses lining the main street and evidence of prosperity everywhere she looked. Yet beneath the surface improvements, she could sense the same restless energy that had driven her to leave, the feeling that this place was too small to contain her ambitions. "You seem troubled," Marcus observed as they approached her father's house on the hill overlooking the town. "I'm concerned about father, naturally." She paused, then decided on honesty. "I'm also trying to understand how much has changed since I left." "Everything changes, Clara. The question is whether we change along with it or get left behind." His words carried an undertone that made her look at him more carefully. "You sound as though you speak from experience." "I do." He brought the carriage to a halt before the familiar white house with its wraparound porch. "I learned some hard lessons about the cost of standing still while life moves forward." Before she could ask what he meant, the front door opened and her father appeared, leaning heavily on a walking stick but alive and clearly improving. Augustus Whitmore had always been a commanding presence, but illness had aged him, leaving him frailer than Clara remembered. "My dear girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion as she rushed into his arms. "You came." "Of course I came, father. How could I not?" Over his shoulder, she saw Marcus watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between longing and resignation that made her wonder what other changes had occurred during her absence. The following days settled into a routine that felt both familiar and strange. Clara threw herself into caring for her father and managing the household, while Marcus appeared daily to discuss mining operations and other business matters. She found herself both impressed by his transformation and unsettled by the easy authority he'd assumed in her father's affairs. "He's been invaluable," her father told her one evening as they sat in the parlor, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. "When I fell ill, Marcus stepped in without being asked. He's got a keen mind for business and more integrity than most men twice his age." "You trust him completely?" "I do. Perhaps more than I should trust any man who's not family." Augusta studied her face carefully. "He's asked about you, many times over the years." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Has he?" "He's never married, Clara. Never even courted anyone seriously, according to Mrs. Henderson's gossip. There are some who say he's been waiting for something or someone." "Father, please don't read too much into." "I'm not reading anything into it, my dear. I'm simply observing that a successful, handsome man who remains unattached at his age is either very particular about his choices or very devoted to someone he can't have." That night, Clara lay awake thinking about her father's words and about the changes she'd observed in Marcus. The boy she'd once known had been earnest and kind, but unremarkable. This man was something else entirely: confident, successful, and possessed of a quiet strength that drew her attention despite her best efforts to remain aloof. The next morning brought an unexpected crisis. Clara was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard raised voices from the front yard. Looking out the window, she saw Marcus in heated discussion with two men she didn't recognize, rough-looking individuals whose presence seemed to agitate him considerably. "You tell Hendricks that our agreement stands," Marcus was saying, his voice carrying clearly through the morning air. "One more month, and then we'll discuss terms." "Hendricks ain't a patient man, Walsh," one of the strangers replied. "He's got other offers for that property, and some of 'em come with cash in hand. Then perhaps he should consider which offers come with honor attached." Clara watched as the men departed, noting the tension in Marcus's shoulders, and the way he stood watching them until they disappeared down the hill. When he turned toward the house, she quickly moved away from the window, but not before catching a glimpse of the worry etched in his features. "Marcus," she called from the porch as he approached, "is everything all right?" He paused, clearly debating how much to tell her. Just some business complications. Nothing that can't be resolved. Those men didn't look like the sort one typically conducts business with. "In mining, Clara, you sometimes have to deal with all sorts of people. Not everyone in this business is a gentleman." She descended the porch steps, drawn by the obvious strain in his voice. "What kind of complications?" Marcus removed his hat, running his fingers through his dark hair, a gesture she remembered from their childhood whenever he was particularly troubled. "There's a man named Hendricks who's been buying up mining claims throughout the territory. He's made offers on several properties, including some that are significant to the community's well-being." "Including father's mine?" "Including your father's mine." He met her gaze directly. "I've been trying to keep certain properties from falling into his hands, but it requires substantial capital. More than I can manage alone." Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Are you saying you've overextended yourself financially to protect father's interests?" "I'm saying I've made choices based on what I believe is right, not just what's profitable." The implications of his words struck her with unexpected force. "Marcus, you could lose everything, couldn't you?" "I could." His admission was quiet but steady. "But some things are worth the risk." She studied his face, seeing past the confident exterior to the man beneath, someone who'd grown into his principles along with his prosperity. "Why would you take such a risk for my father? For this town?" "Because sometimes a man has to stand for something larger than his own interests." He paused, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And sometimes he has to prove he's worthy of what he values most." The words hung between them, laden with meaning she wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge. Before she could respond, her father's voice called from inside the house, breaking the spell. "Clara? Marcus? Come in, please. We need to discuss some matters." They found Augustus in his study, looking more serious than Clara had seen him since her return. "Sit down, both of you. It's time we addressed the situation directly." Clara took a seat in the leather chair she'd occupied as a child when summoned for important conversations, while Marcus remained standing near the window. "Clara, I haven't been entirely honest with you about my circumstances," her father began. "The mine is profitable, but it requires significant investment to remain competitive. Marcus has been providing that investment, but recent developments have made our situation more precarious." "What kind of developments?" "This man Hendricks has been systematically acquiring mining operations throughout the territory," Marcus explained. "He's not interested in long-term development or community stability. He extracts what he can quickly, then moves on, leaving environmental damage and economic devastation behind." "And he wants our mine?" "He wants several mines," Augustus said, "including the Peterson claim, the Morrison property, and yes, ours. If he acquires enough operations, he'll control the entire economic foundation of Copper Ridge." Clara felt the weight of the situation settling over her. "What are our options?" "We can sell to Hendricks and accept whatever terms he offers," her father said. "Or we can try to raise enough capital to maintain our independence and help other property owners do the same." "How much capital?" Marcus and her father exchanged glances. "More than we currently have access to," Marcus admitted. "I've invested heavily in several operations, and while they're profitable, the returns take time to materialize. Hendricks is offering immediate cash, which is attractive to people who need money now." Clara rose from her chair and moved to the window, looking out over the town she'd once been so eager to leave. From this vantage point, she could see the bustling main street, the church spire, the school where she'd received her early education. It was a community built by people who'd believed in something permanent, something worth staying for. "There is another option," she said quietly. Both men looked at her expectantly. "I have some resources of my own. Not a great deal, but perhaps enough to help." "Clara, no," her father said immediately. "I won't have you risking your security for this venture." "Why not?" She turned to face them both. "If it's worth Marcus risking everything he's built, why isn't it worth my contributing what I can?" "Because if this fails, you'll have nothing to fall back on," Marcus said. "At least I have other investments, other opportunities. You'd be putting your entire future at stake." "My future is already at stake," she replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "This is my home, my family's legacy. If I walk away now, what kind of person does that make me?" Marcus stepped closer, his expression intense. "It makes you practical. It makes you someone who understands that sometimes the wisest course is to cut your losses and start fresh elsewhere." "Is that what you think I should do? Cut my losses and leave again?" "I think you should do what's best for your long-term happiness and security." "And what if I don't know what that is anymore?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Clara realized she was no longer talking only about financial decisions. "Perhaps," her father said gently, "you should take some time to consider all your options. This doesn't have to be decided today." But even as she nodded agreement, Clara knew that time was a luxury they didn't have. Hendricks wouldn't wait indefinitely, and the longer they delayed, the more precarious their position became. That evening, Clara found herself walking through the town alone, something she'd never done as a young woman. The streets were quieter now, with most businesses closed and families gathered around their dinner tables. She passed the church where she'd been baptized, the school where she'd learned to read, the general store where she'd bought penny candy with carefully hoarded coins. Each familiar landmark forced her to confront a truth she'd been avoiding. Despite her excitement about city life, despite her dreams of sophisticated society and cultural opportunities, she'd never felt quite at home in San Francisco. She'd been successful there, had built a respectable life, but something essential had always been missing. "Clara?" She turned to find Marcus approaching, his long strides quickly closing the distance between them. "I saw you from the hotel and thought I should make sure you were all right," he said. "It's not safe for a lady to be walking alone after dark." "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, thank you." "I'm sure you are, but humor me." They walked in comfortable silence for several minutes before Clara spoke. "Why did you never marry, Marcus?" The question seemed to surprise him. "That's rather direct." "I find myself curious about direct answers these days." He was quiet for so long that she wondered if he would answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully measured. I suppose I never found anyone who made me want to compromise my independence. That's not an answer. That's an evasion. Very well. I never married because the woman I wanted was determined to build her life somewhere else, and I wasn't willing to settle for someone else. Clara stopped walking, her pulse quickening. Marcus. I know what you're going to say. That I was foolish to wait, that I should have moved on, that I built my life around an impossible dream. He turned to face her, his expression intense in the moonlight. But I've learned that some dreams are worth waiting for, even if they never come true. What if they do come true? What if the woman you wanted has discovered that what she thought she wanted and what she actually needs are entirely different things? Then I suppose I'd tell her that I've spent the last 3 years building something worthy of her, that I've become a man she could be proud to stand beside, not just someone who adores her from a distance. Clara felt tears in her eyes. And what if she told you that she's been running from something she was too young and too frightened to understand? That she spent 3 years in a beautiful city surrounded by interesting people and still felt like something essential was missing? Then I'd tell her that some journeys are necessary, even when they lead us back to where we started. That growing up sometimes means leaving so we can choose to stay. Marcus, her voice was barely a whisper. I love you, Clara. I've loved you since we were children, and I'll love you when we're old and gray, if I'm fortunate enough to live that long. But I won't ask you to sacrifice your dreams for mine. What if my dreams have changed? What if I've realized that building something meaningful with someone you love is the greatest adventure of all? He reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing her cheek. Then I'd say that I've been waiting my whole life for you to come home. When he kissed her, it was with the tenderness of a man who'd dreamed of this moment for years and the passion of someone who'd learned not to waste precious opportunities. Clara melted into his embrace, feeling as though she was finally truly home. I want to invest in the mine, she said against his lips. I want to fight Hendricks. I want to build something lasting here. Are you sure? This isn't just about romantic feelings, Clara. This is about your entire future. I'm sure. I'm also sure that I want to build that future with you, if you'll have me. Marcus pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'll have you any way I can get you. As a business partner, as a friend, as my wife, whatever you're willing to give me. I'm willing to give you everything, Marcus Walsh. My money, my time, my life, all of it. Then I suppose we'd better go tell your father we've got a fight on our hands. Indeed we do. And Marcus? Yes? I love you too. I think I always have, but I needed to leave to understand what that meant. 6 months later, Clara stood in the same spot where she'd first seen Marcus again, but now she wore white silk instead of traveling clothes, and her hand bore a simple gold band that caught the morning light. The mine was thriving under their joint management. Hendricks had been forced to look elsewhere for his acquisitions, and Copper Ridge was experiencing a period of growth and prosperity that seemed built on solid foundations rather than quick profits. Having second thoughts? Marcus asked, approaching from behind to slip his arms around her waist. Never, she replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. I was just thinking about how strange it is that I had to leave to learn how to come home. Some journeys are like that. They teach us to value what we already have. And some men are worth waiting for, even when they're too foolish to believe they deserve what they want. Marcus turned her in his arms, his expression soft with contentment. I suppose we both learned something about taking chances. Indeed we did. And Marcus? Yes, Miss Walsh? I'm very glad we did. As they walked back toward their home, the house on the hill where her father now lived contentedly as a grandfather in waiting, Clara reflected on the unexpected paths that had brought them to this moment. She'd thought she was returning to Copper Ridge to care for her father and settle his affairs. Instead, she'd found her true calling, her deepest love, and a future that promised both security and adventure. The mining operation continued to prosper under their careful management, but more importantly, they'd helped establish a community bank that made it easier for small property owners to resist pressure from outside speculators. The town that had once seemed too small to contain her dreams now felt like the perfect place to build something lasting. Do you ever miss San Francisco? Marcus asked as they paused on the porch to watch the sunset over the mountains. I miss some things about it, Claire admitted. The theater, the museums, the sense that the whole world was available if I wanted to explore it. But I've learned that the whole world isn't much good if you don't have someone to share it with. We could travel, you know. The mine is successful enough now that we could spend some time in the city each year, if you'd like. I'd like that very much, but I'd also like to come home afterward. Always home? Always home. This is where we belong, Marcus. This is where our story is meant to unfold. As if in response to her words, the evening breeze carried the sound of the church bell ringing the hour, a sound that had marked time in Copper Ridge for generations and would continue long after they were gone. It was a sound that spoke of continuity, of community, of the enduring power of choosing to stay and build something meaningful. Clara smiled and led her husband inside, knowing that their greatest adventures still lay ahead, not in distant cities or foreign lands, but in the daily choice to love, to work, and to grow together in the place they'd chosen to call home. The telegram that had summoned her back to Copper Ridge still lay in her jewelry box, yellowed now with age. Sometimes she would take it out and read it, marveling at how those few urgent words had changed the entire course of her life. Father gravely ill. Come at once. She'd come at once, thinking she was answering a crisis. Instead, she'd found her destiny waiting at a train station, disguised as a man she'd once known but had never truly seen. Some journeys, she'd learned, were worth taking not because of where they led, but because of who was waiting at the end of the road. And Marcus Walsh had been worth every mile of the journey home.